Welcome to Famous People, English Stories. Ready to level up your English? Here we learn through stories slow, clear, and fun. Listen, relax, and enjoy the journey.
Introduction: The Crack in the Frame. On their living room wall hung a photo of them laughing, heads tilted back, eyes closed, the kind of joy that felt permanent. People said they were the perfect couple. But perfection, Emma had learned, could be paper thin. It had started with a change in his tone. A slight distance. A silence after "I love you." Then came the truth, ugly, unforgiving. Her husband, Daniel, had been unfaithful. The discovery didn't explode like a bomb. It seeped into her life like water through cracked stone, eroding what they'd built. This isn't just a story about cheating. It's about the hollow sound of trust breaking, the weight of staying, the fear of leaving, and the complicated, raw, human question: can love survive betrayal? Chapter 1: The Message. It was 8:43 p.m. on a Tuesday when it happened. Emma was folding laundry on the bed, half watching a documentary she'd seen before, half listening for the timer on the oven. The air smelled like roasted garlic and thyme. Their daughter was asleep upstairs. Life, on the surface, was quiet. Predictable. Daniel's phone buzzed on the nightstand. One vibration. Then two. She didn't look at it immediately. She rarely did. Trust, she believed, was built in small gestures, like never needing to check a partner's phone. But the third buzz pulled her eyes toward it. A name flashed on the screen. One she didn't recognize. "Can't stop thinking about you." 6 words. That's all it took. Emma blinked, her hands pausing mid-fold. She wasn't even sure why her heart skipped. People get strange messages all the time, she told herself. Wrong number, maybe. But something about the way the screen dimmed, the way Daniel walked into the room just then, casual and warm, made her stomach twist. "Hey, smells good," he said, kissing her temple. She didn't say anything. Just nodded. Inside, something had already changed. It was like being handed a key you didn't want. To a door you never meant to open. That night, she didn't ask about the message. She waited. She observed. The way he turned his phone face down. The way he lingered in the shower longer than usual. The sudden, quiet tension in his smile. By Friday, she knew. She waited until their daughter had gone to a friend's sleepover. The house was too quiet again. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand. "Who's Lily?" she asked. Daniel froze mid-step. His hand still on the back of the dining chair, eyes darting, calculating. "She's no one." "A client," he said. "A client who can't stop thinking about you?" Silence. Long and loud. It filled the room like smoke. "I didn't mean for it to happen." The words hit her harder than the lie. It happened. He didn't even deny it. Emma stared at him, really stared. This was the man she married. The man who cried at their wedding. Who held her hair when she was sick. Who whispered promises against her skin. And yet, here he was, confessing something that made all of that feel hollow. How long? She asked. 2 months, he said quietly. 2 months. While she'd been planning their anniversary. While she'd been tucking their daughter in at night, believing they were safe. Whole. She didn't cry. Not yet. Her tears felt locked behind a wall of disbelief. Instead, she nodded slowly and stood up. I'm sleeping in the guest room. That was all she said. Daniel reached out to her, but she stepped back. Not tonight. Not anymore. That night, Emma lay awake on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every touch, every kiss, wondering which ones were real, and which were just shadows she never saw coming. And in that darkness, the silence said more than either of them could. Chapter 2: How It Started. Daniel didn't wake up one morning and decide to ruin his marriage. It started with silence. Not hers, his own. The kind that creeps in when words feel too small to explain the weight in your chest. He told himself he was just tired. Work had been relentless, the kind of endless grind that made everything outside of it feel like background noise. He'd come home late, sit down at the dinner table, and smile on cue. Ask about school, pretend to care about the PTA meetings, nod along as Emma talked about her latest freelance project. But deep down, he felt invisible. Not unloved, just unseen. Emma had changed too. Not in a dramatic way. Just shifted. They talked less. Touched less. She was a mother first, a partner second. And he felt selfish for even thinking that. She was doing everything right, holding their family together, making sure their daughter had stability, warmth, structure. But Daniel wasn't sure when they'd last looked at each other like they used to. Not just looked, but seen. The loneliness didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It was quiet. Subtle. A missed kiss. A distracted love you. A month without intimacy. Then another. Then came Lily. She worked at a consulting firm they'd hired for a marketing project. Sharp, funny, a little reckless in ways that made him feel like he could breathe again. She laughed at his dry jokes. She asked about his day and actually waited for the answer. One night after a late meeting, they ended up at a bar, not planned, not inappropriate, just easy. That's what caught him off guard. The ease. He didn't intend to cross a line. But it was like stepping too close to a ledge. 1 minute you're looking over. The next, you're falling. The first time it happened, he hated himself for it. He sat in his car afterward, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror. The guilt was instant. Heavy. But he didn't stop. That was the part he couldn't explain. Why he didn't stop. It wasn't about sex. It wasn't even about Lily, not really. It was about the version of himself he saw through her eyes, lighter, freer, not weighed down by responsibility or routine. He felt wanted. Not needed. Wanted. But every time he went home, he felt the crack widen. Emma's laugh became harder to hear. Her questions became harder to answer. And their daughter's face, God, the way she looked at him with so much trust, it made something in him ache. He kept telling himself he'd end it. That he just needed a little more time. But time doesn't give back what you waste. When Emma asked about the message, something in his chest dropped. Not fear, relief. Like the truth had been waiting to breathe. And now, the damage was done. The thing he swore he'd never be, the man who cheats, was exactly who he'd become. As he lay awake on the other side of the house that night, listening to the soft hum of silence between the walls, Daniel knew there was no going back to what they had. Only forward, into something uncertain. Maybe honest. Maybe over. But whatever it was, it had already begun. Chapter 3: Shattered Glass. Emma didn't plan what she was going to say. There was no speech, no carefully rehearsed monologue. She had spent the last 3 nights in the guest room with a pillow that smelled like fabric softener and not much else. She hadn't cried. Not once. But there was a constant pressure in her chest, like her heart had become a clenched fist that refused to open. She asked him to sit. Daniel obeyed, slow and hesitant, as if he were stepping onto cracked ice. He looked tired. Guilty. She hated how much she still noticed the small things about him, the way he rubbed the edge of his thumb when he was nervous, how his breathing changed before he spoke. "I want the truth," she said. "All of it. Not just what you think I can handle." Daniel looked at her for a long time. His voice, when it came, was quiet. "I didn't mean for it to happen." She flinched. "Don't insult me with that." He nodded. "It started with late meetings. She made me feel like I wasn't invisible." Emma's mouth went dry. The words felt like broken glass between them. She thought she wanted honesty, but now, it cut. "So, I made you feel invisible," she said. "No. Emma, I don't blame you. I blame myself. I should have said something when I started feeling distant. I should have fought harder." "Fought what?" she snapped. "Me? Our life? Our child?" He looked down. The silence stretched, full of years they had spent building a life, mortgage payments, birthday parties, quiet Tuesday dinners, and now it hung in the balance, teetering on his shame and her fury. "Was it serious?" she asked. Daniel hesitated, and in that second, she saw the answer. "That's worse than if it was just sex," she said. "You cared about her." "I cared about how I felt around her." "I don't even know if that's the same thing." Emma stood, pacing the edge of the kitchen, her hands shaking. "Do you love her?" "No," he said quickly. "No, I don't." "But you loved me," she said, voice cracking for the first time. "You did. I know you did. I still do." "Don't," she said sharply, her hand slicing through the air like a blade. "Don't throw that word at me like a bandage. If you loved me, you wouldn't have." She couldn't finish. Her throat burned. Daniel stood slowly, unsure whether to come closer. "I don't expect you to forgive me. Emma, I hate what I did. I hate that I let something so temporary hurt something that mattered." She looked at him then, really looked. The man she married was still there. But something fundamental had cracked. A bone that broke clean through and would never set quite the same. "I don't know what happens next," she said. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'll go to therapy. I'll sleep on the couch forever if I have to. I just want the chance to fix it." She didn't answer. There was nothing to say that wouldn't feel too loud, too final. Emma walked to the cabinet, opened it with trembling fingers, and took out a wine glass. She poured it half full and set it on the table, between them. Neither of them touched it. "Tonight," she whispered, "just sit with me. Don't talk. Don't fix. Just sit." Daniel nodded. And so they sat. Two people surrounded by the shards of what once was, unsure if anything could be pieced back together. But still, there they were. Still breathing. Still trying. Even if they weren't sure what for. Chapter 4: The Other Woman. Her name was Lily Monroe. 32. Unmarried. Worked in corporate strategy. Liked jazz and posted black and white photos of New York on her social media like she lived in a movie. She wasn't what Emma expected. Emma had imagined someone else. Someone louder, more dramatic. Someone who wore red lipstick and laughed too hard. Someone obvious. But Lily was ordinary. And somehow, that made it worse. It had taken Emma 3 days to look her up. She told herself she didn't care. That Lily didn't matter. But curiosity, or maybe pain dressed as curiosity, pulled her into the search. A single scroll through Lily's feed, and Emma saw fragments of her own life mirrored back at her: coffee cups, early meetings, a plant in a white pot, long walks in city parks. She was the kind of woman Emma might have passed on the street without thinking twice. Or smiled at in a waiting room. She wasn't a villain. She was real. And that terrified Emma. The worst part? Lily knew Daniel was married. He hadn't lied to her about that. "It's complicated," he had said. "We've grown apart." Words that Emma could practically hear in his voice, layered in just enough sadness to sound like truth, even when it wasn't. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, her phone still open on Lily's page. She stared at a picture of her smiling at a rooftop restaurant, a glass of wine in hand. A caption read, "Some things come unexpectedly. I don't regret them." The date on the post made Emma's breath catch. That night, Emma confronted Daniel again. Not with anger, but with exhaustion. With the quiet kind of rage that comes after the fire. "She knew," Emma said. Daniel was silent for a moment. Then nodded. "She did. And she didn't care? I think she thought we were already over." Emma let out a bitter laugh. "Were we?" Daniel didn't answer. "I'm not going to ask if you loved her again," she continued. "Because I don't think that's the point anymore. You gave her pieces of you that belonged to us. You let her believe I didn't matter." "That's not true," Daniel said quickly. "You always mattered. I just..." "You just what?" "Forgot?" No, he said. I got lost. That's not an excuse. I know that. But I didn't go into it thinking I was choosing her over you. I wasn't choosing anyone. I was running. Emma looked at him, her jaw tight. And where do you think that leaves me? Our daughter? Daniel looked like he was about to cry, but Emma didn't want his tears. She didn't want his regret. She wanted the version of him who used to make late-night pancakes and dance with her in the kitchen. She wanted the man who held her hand through labor. The man who used to call her his person. She didn't want this. The betrayal didn't belong only to their marriage. It belonged to every memory that now felt poisoned, every future moment she once looked forward to that now carried an asterisk. Emma stood. She didn't say anything else. Didn't throw anything or slam the door. She just walked away. Not out of weakness, but to protect what little of herself still felt whole. And for the first time since the truth came out, Daniel didn't follow her. He just sat there, alone with the wreckage. The other woman was no longer part of the equation. Not really. She had already faded into the background. Now, all that remained was Emma's pain. And the question neither of them could yet answer, was there anything left worth saving? Chapter 5: Why People Cheat. Emma never thought she'd be the kind of woman who stayed. She'd said it so many times before, in conversations with friends, in movies where the heroine packed her bags and walked away with dignity. If someone ever cheated on me, that's it. I'd be done. But real life doesn't play by the same script. Now, weeks after the confession, Emma stood in the shower with the water burning her skin, trying to scrub away a pain that lived beneath the surface. She hadn't left. Not yet. Not because she forgave him, and certainly not because she forgot. She stayed because walking away was harder than she'd imagined. Their daughter's laughter still filled the house. Her toothbrush was next to his. There were bills with both their names. And love, whatever shape it had twisted into, hadn't entirely disappeared. It lingered like fog. Why do people cheat? Emma thought about this often. As if finding the answer would shrink the hurt. She used to believe it was about lust. A selfish urge. But Daniel's betrayal hadn't felt like that. It felt lonelier, more desperate, like something he himself didn't understand. And that scared her more than anything. Daniel, too, had been thinking. He sat in his car during his lunch breaks now, staring out the window at nothing. The affair had ended. That part, at least, was over. But in its place was a hollow silence between him and Emma that couldn't be filled with apologies. He didn't try to justify what he'd done. But he did try to understand it. Not for her, though she deserved every explanation he could offer, but for himself. He had loved Emma. Still did, in some twisted, broken way. But somewhere between work deadlines, unpaid attention, and unspoken disappointments, something inside him began to dry out. He missed feeling desired. Not sexually, emotionally. He missed the feeling that he mattered outside of what he provided, outside of being a father, a provider, a dependable husband. And Lily had offered him that illusion. People cheat because they feel unseen, Daniel thought. Because they are cowards. Because they want to escape themselves, and someone else's attention offers a mirror that doesn't reflect their flaws. For a moment, he saw a version of himself that was lighter, freer, worth looking at. But the price was everything he once promised to protect. That afternoon, they sat on opposite ends of the couch, watching their daughter build a puzzle on the floor. Emma broke the silence. "Why her?" she asked, without looking at him. Daniel didn't answer right away. "She didn't know me," he said finally. "Not the real me. And maybe that made it easier to pretend I wasn't broken." Emma let the words sit there. "She knew you were married." "I know. I want to hate her," Emma whispered. "But I keep wondering if it even mattered who she was. If it would have been anyone. Anyone who made you feel seen." Daniel looked at her, his eyes full of a sadness she didn't recognize. "I wish I could undo it. I'd give anything to go back." "But you can't," she said. "And I can't unknow what I know. I look at you now, and it's like, you're still you, but everything is rearranged. And I don't know if I can put it all back together." Daniel didn't argue. For once, he didn't reach across the space between them. The truth was out. The damage was done. Now came the hard part, not fixing what broke, but deciding whether it was worth rebuilding at all. Chapter 6: Emma's Silence. The house had never been this quiet. Not even in the middle of the night, not even when their daughter was away. This silence was different. It wasn't peace, it was absence. It was the sound of Emma holding her breath, unsure if she still belonged in her own life. She moved through the days like someone walking through fog. She woke up, got dressed, packed lunches, answered emails. She smiled at neighbors, nodded at teachers, made polite conversation with the barista who always complimented her scarf. And all the while, she said nothing. Daniel had tried, especially in the first week. He lingered around her like a shadow. Asked if she wanted tea. Mentioned articles he thought she'd like. He didn't push. Didn't beg. Just hovered carefully, as if one wrong word might shatter her completely. But Emma didn't respond. Not with cruelty. Not with forgiveness. Just silence. At night, she lay in the guest bed staring at the ceiling, her hands resting flat against the blanket. She didn't cry. Not often. Only when she wasn't expecting it, like in the car, or when she passed a couple holding hands at the grocery store. Her body had learned to hide the pain before her mind could process it. She had no interest in friends' advice. Talk to him. Make him suffer. Take space. Everyone had an opinion. But none of them had worn her life. None of them had to look into the face of the person who had once kissed her forehead like a prayer and now couldn't meet her eyes. The truth was, Emma didn't know what she wanted. She didn't want a divorce, not yet. But she didn't want the marriage as it was either. Something had cracked in her. A piece of herself she used to offer freely, to comfort, to connect, was now curled tight, unwilling to come forward. One afternoon, their daughter asked the question Emma had been dreading. Why are you sleeping in the other room? Emma looked up from the dish she was rinsing. Sometimes moms and dads need space to think. Are you mad at Dad? Emma paused. I'm sad. Her daughter nodded, accepting that sadness like children do. Then she hugged her and ran off to draw. Later, Emma stood outside the bedroom door. She could hear Daniel inside, typing something on his laptop, the soft click of keys. It hit her, suddenly, that she didn't really know what his days looked like anymore. What he read, what he thought about when he wasn't being a husband or a father. Was that where it began? The forgetting? The distance? She turned and walked back to the guest room. That night, Daniel left something on the table, a small notebook. The kind she used to keep for grocery lists and poems she never showed anyone. On the first page, he'd written, "If you can't talk to me, maybe you can write to me." She didn't touch it. Not yet. But she left it on the nightstand instead of throwing it away. And that, perhaps, was the loudest thing she'd said all week. Chapter 7, Trying to Fix What's Broken. He started going to therapy alone. Not because Emma asked him to. Not because it would fix everything. But because he had to do something, anything, to face the damage he caused. Daniel sat on the worn gray couch in the therapist's office, hands clasped tightly, explaining things he hadn't said out loud, even to himself. "I don't want to be the man who hurt her," he said. "But I am." The therapist didn't interrupt. Just nodded. Sometimes silence was an answer. At home, Emma noticed the changes, small and quiet. He stopped trying to force conversation. Instead, he listened. He cleaned up more. He made dinner, even when she didn't eat it. He didn't act like everything was normal. He acted like he knew it wasn't, and that mattered more than anything he said. One morning, Emma opened the notebook. She didn't write much. Just a few lines. "I don't know if I still love you the way I used to. I don't know what that love even is now. But I'm here. Still breathing. Still trying to find out who I am without this anger." She left it open on the kitchen table. The next morning, the notebook was back on her nightstand. A reply written in careful handwriting. "I understand. I don't expect your forgiveness. But I'll keep showing up, even if I have to earn 1 inch of you at a time." They didn't talk about it. They just kept writing. Emma found herself watching him differently now. Not as a stranger, but not quite as a husband either. More like a man standing outside the ruins of something sacred, asking to be let in again. But there was no key anymore. He'd have to build a new way in, brick by brick. They started counseling together 3 weeks later. Their first session was brutal. Emma spoke first. She said things she hadn't allowed herself to say before. "I don't trust you. I don't feel safe with you. And I hate that I still want to." Daniel took the words like punches. But he didn't flinch. "I deserve all of that," he said. "I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to understand why I broke something I swore I'd protect." The counselor guided them through silence and questions. There were tears. Long pauses. Laughter once, unexpected and sharp, over a shared memory from their early days. It came and went like a ripple in still water. Emma didn't feel better afterward. Not really. But she felt heard. At home, their daughter began sleeping more soundly again. She noticed things too, in her own quiet way. Like the night Emma sat beside Daniel on the couch, not touching, but not far. Or the morning they exchanged a look across the breakfast table that wasn't angry or cold, just tired. Human. Trying to fix what's broken didn't look like grand gestures. It looked like ordinary moments handled with care. Dishes done without being asked. A shoulder turned slightly toward hers on the couch. One more page in the notebook. Emma still didn't know what came next. But for the first time, she believed something could come next. Not a return to what they were. But maybe the beginning of something new. Something honest. Even if it hurt. Chapter 8. A room of her own. The room was small, just wide enough for a desk, a worn armchair, and the bookshelf Daniel once built for her birthday. It had been the guest room for years. Then the place she fled to after the truth came out. Now, slowly, Emma was claiming it for something else. Not a retreat. A beginning. She moved the desk under the window where the light came in soft and gold. She brought in her old journals, notebooks filled with fragments of poetry and half-written stories. She hadn't touched them in years. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped making space for the parts of herself that didn't serve a purpose. The parts that weren't wife, mother, problem solver. But now, she opened the pages. Not to fix anything. Just to remember. She painted the walls herself, soft sage green. It wasn't perfect. The lines weren't clean. But when she stepped back and looked at it, she felt something shift inside her. This room didn't have to be pretty. It just had to be hers. Daniel helped her hang a cork board. He didn't ask questions. Just held the level steady and handed her the hammer when she asked. It was a quiet task, but when he looked at her afterward and said, "You deserve a space that's only yours," she almost cried. She didn't. Not then. But later that night, alone in the armchair, she let the tears come. They were slow and soundless, not the kind of crying that asks to be held. Just a quiet release of all the invisible weight she'd been carrying. For the first time in a long time, Emma didn't feel like she was waiting. Not for Daniel to change. Not for the pain to pass. Not for life to return to what it was. That life was gone. In its place was something quieter, less certain, but more honest. She began writing again. Not about the affair. Not yet. But about herself. Her childhood. Her favorite teacher. The first time she held her daughter and felt the wild, terrifying love that rewrote everything she thought she knew about her heart. She wrote about books that changed her, songs that hurt her in a beautiful way, and one small red bird she'd seen on the porch that morning, watching her as if it knew something she didn't. Daniel knocked before entering now. She appreciated that. Sometimes she let him in. Sometimes she didn't. They were learning how to be in the same house without crowding each other. It wasn't easy. It wasn't romantic. But it was real. And that room, her room, became her anchor. Some nights, she lit a candle and read until the pages blurred. Other nights, she just sat in silence and let herself feel whatever came up: grief, hope, anger, peace. She didn't tell anyone else about the room. It wasn't a secret, but it wasn't for anyone but her. In that space, she didn't have to be strong or forgiving or composed. She could just be Emma. Not the betrayed. Not the forgiving. Just herself. And that, she realized, was the most important healing of all. Chapter 9: The Final Conversation. The house smelled faintly of rain and worn leather. Evening had fallen, but the soft glow from the kitchen light spilled into the hallway, casting long shadows on the walls. Emma stood by the window, watching droplets slide down the glass. Daniel entered quietly, stopping a few feet behind her. Neither spoke at first. The air was thick, a mixture of years and silence and all the unspoken words that had collected between them. Finally, Daniel broke the quiet. "I've been thinking about what you said, about trust. About safety." Emma didn't turn. It's hard to feel safe when the person you trusted most broke you. He nodded slowly. "I know. I've been trying to understand how to rebuild that. But I don't want to rush you. I want to respect your pace. Your pain." She swallowed, the lump in her throat heavy. "I still love you," he said quietly. "Maybe not the perfect love we dreamed of, but something real. Something willing to survive the worst." Emma turned then, eyes steady but tired. "I don't know if love is enough anymore." Daniel's face tightened, but he didn't look away. "Do you want to stay?" she asked. He hesitated. "I want to try. If you want that too." She shook her head. "I'm not sure what I want. Sometimes I think leaving would hurt less than staying." Daniel's voice cracked. "Leaving would break me." Emma reached out, touching his hand briefly. "But staying without trust," she whispered, "would break me too." They stood like that for a moment, two broken pieces, unsure if they could fit back together or if they belonged in separate puzzles. "I want us to be honest," Emma said finally. "Not just with each other, but with ourselves. We owe that much." Daniel nodded. "I don't want to live a lie. Or pretend the past never happened." Emma's voice softened. "But I also don't want to close the door completely. Maybe it's about learning to open it again. Slowly. Carefully. With fear and hope in equal measure." He smiled faintly. "That's all I ask for." They moved closer, tentative, and for the first time in months, the space between them felt less like a chasm and more like a bridge. Neither knew what tomorrow would bring. But in that quiet moment, they chose to keep walking forward together, one uncertain step at a time. Chapter 10: The Choice. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft lines across the bed where Emma lay awake. Outside, the world moved on, birds sang, cars passed, life continued in a way that seemed cruel and beautiful all at once. She thought about the last few months, every tear, every silence, every fragile moment between her and Daniel. About the letter she never wrote but often imagined sending. About the nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if the pain would ever fade. Emma sat up and reached for the small notebook Daniel had given her, the one that had become their quiet conversation when words failed. She flipped through the pages, reading back through their raw, honest exchanges. A dialogue of fractured hearts seeking a way forward. Her heart ached with 1,000 unsaid things. She thought about their daughter, her bright eyes and innocent laughter, their tether to a future none of them could predict. She thought about forgiveness, not as forgetting, but as choosing what to carry and what to leave behind. And she thought about love, not the perfect love from fairy tales, but the real kind, messy and complicated and stubborn. Emma rose from the bed, the weight inside her shifting. She walked to the living room where Daniel sat with a book in his hands, the same man who had broken her world and who was still, somehow, the man she had once vowed to love. She sat beside him, close enough to feel the warmth, but with the space she needed. "I'm not sure what comes next," she said softly. Daniel closed his book, meeting her gaze with quiet hope. "But I want to try," she continued. "Not because I forget what happened, but because I believe we can build something new." He reached out, taking her hand gently. "We'll need time," he said. "We will," she agreed. The choice wasn't easy. It wasn't wrapped in certainty or promises. It was messy. It was fragile. But it was theirs. Together. And sometimes, that's enough. If this story touched something inside you, whether it's pain, hope, or the struggle to forgive, remember, healing is never simple, but it's always possible. If you're facing challenges in your own relationships, don't be afraid to reach out for support, for understanding, or just to share your story. Sometimes, the bravest step is simply to keep trying. What would you do if you were Emma? Would you stay, or would you go? Share your thoughts below and let's start a conversation about love, trust, and the choices that shape us all.